All right, hello everyone. Thanks for coming out. My name is Heather Harris. I'm the Museum Operations Manager here at the Bedeque Museum. And I'm very pleased to be introducing tonight's speaker, who I'm sure you all know. Dr. Doug Sobey will be talking on the topic Elaine Harrison, teacher, artist, poet, publisher, and campaigner. Doug Sobey was born in Summerside, where he got his schooling before going on to Mount Allison University, where he obtained a Bachelor's of Science degree in biology. With the support of the Commonwealth Scholarship, he went on to study at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, where he obtained a master's degree and a PhD both in ecology. His working career was spent teaching ecology and plant biology at various educational institutes in Northern Ireland, and especially at the University of Ulster. Since his retirement, he has continued to pursue his research interests into the forests of Prince Edward Island, including all aspects of their history. He has been a research associate of the Institute of Island Studies at UPEI since 1992. 11 of his papers on the present and past forests of PEI have been published by the island government, and he has written many historical and scientific papers on the subject for scientific journals and the Island magazine. He is co-author with Earl Lockerbie of the 2015 book, Samuel Holland, His Work and Legacy on Prince Edward Island, and of course he was a founding member of the Bedeque Area Historical Society in 2010, and its president since 2018. For the last 10 years, he has supervised the museum summer programs here. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Doug.
Well, thank you, Heather, for that introduction. I usually don't get to introduce, I get to introduce other people, but and in previous talks I've introduced myself, but I thought since we've got a museum manager, I can fill out the whole thing and let Heather do it. Tonight I'm talking about something fairly personal to me. Elaine Harrison was my grade 11 and 12 school teacher. And I want to ask in the audience, is there anyone else in the audience, and can you raise your hand if you also were taught by Elaine Harrison? Wow. Oh my gosh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 at least. So although she stopped teaching, I'm trying to think, 60 years ago, possibly, 1968, 1966 or so. There are still people around that were taught by her, including myself. Elaine Harrison was a remarkable woman. She was a teacher for 30 years at Summerside High School and had a great influence on many of her students. She is one of Prince Edward Island's better-known artists of the late 20th century. She was an occasional poet of note. She was a publisher on a small scale of her own poetry and of the writings of several other women. And she was my teacher, but she also became my neighbor and my friend. So this evening I will present some of my recollections of Elaine based on a level of contact that varied in its closeness over a period of 40 years. It is thus going to be very much a subjective and personal presentation tonight. My contact with Elaine began in 1963 when I went into grade 11. She was my grade 11 English and Latin teacher at Summerside High School, and she instilled in me a love of Shakespeare which has remained with me ever since. And I go to Stratford-upon-Avon in England, not entirely as a result of Elaine, but it was that initial impetus. We'll move on. This is the lady. My contact continued through grade 12 Latin, when I was the only pupil in her class. So we were in the teacher's room, one-to-one. No one else wanted to take Latin. I took the subject because I knew she would be teaching it. I had to drop biology as a result. And then I went on to Mount Allison to do biology, and not Latin. Then during my university years at Mount Allison and later in Aberdeen and later also in Belfast, whenever I came back to Canada, I was working then in the UK, and I spent my whole working life there until my retirement in 2004, and I've been able to come back to the island for longer periods. So during those summers, I would visit her in her house at Bedeque, and until 1983, when I became her neighbor in Bedeque. And how this happened tells something about Elaine, as well as about me. Back on the island from Ireland for a Christmas visit in December 1981, when my mother was ill and in hospital, I called out to see Elaine and Eleanor at their winter home in Bedeque. In the course of the afternoon, she pointed to a very old and derelict house, visible from her kitchen window, and with a voice of command said, "You should buy that house." You know the voice. "If someone doesn't, they will set fire to it some Halloween, and the whole village will burn." Thus it was that in 1983, I became her neighbor. And as a result, over the next 20 years, I got to know her very well. But let's go back to the beginning. I don't think Elaine would be very pleased with that teacher. That's the picture from the 1964 yearbook for Summerside High School. And it was already out of date by the time that, I'm sure it was 10 or 15 years out of date. But she is very formal in that picture, and she certainly presented a formal and stern image to all her pupils. There was no messing with Elaine Harrison. But she seems to have mellowed, as you see, by 2001 at the age of 85. Or perhaps she hadn't. Elaine Russell Harrison was born on the south shore of Nova Scotia on June 19th, 1915, at Petite Rivière, I guess is the name, but Rivière is the French version, where her father, the Reverend George Harrison, was beginning his career as an Anglican rector, and where she was the firstborn child to her mother, Minerva Barnes. Just a minute. I have to find the buttons. They're not, oh yes, here it is. It's not moving, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going on here. It's not responding to my, let me see. I've got two versions. I've got two versions. Okay, so I just press that button. She was the eldest child of, as I said, the Anglican rector at Petite Rivière. She was the firstborn child to her parents, and this is the family that she painted later, probably from a photograph. And there was a brother, Garth, and a sister, Phyllis. Shortly after, the family moved to Halifax, where she and her parents survived the Halifax explosion of 1917. She was fond of telling the story of how, when the blast went off, she had been sitting on her potty and was sent flying across the room. She would only have been 2, so whether she actually remembered that, but the family would have certainly told her about it. Most of her young days were spent in Spring Hill, Nova Scotia, where she was brought up in a happy but frugal family with 2 younger siblings, as you see there. Another of her childhood stories was about the visit of the Anglican bishop to Spring Hill. She set out to impress him by coming into the room where he was in conversation with her father and proceeded to stand on her head. She was very disappointed that neither man paid her any attention whatsoever. This early experiment in theatrics must have taught her that to get noticed, she had to add a vocal element to her performance. She attended Dalhousie University, graduating in 1937 with a distinction in English and Latin, and after 6 unhappy months teaching, as she put it, rich girls at Havergal College, a private school in Toronto, she came to Summerside, where her father had just been appointed rector. She was to fall in love with the island, and it was to be her home for the rest of her life. In 1938, she began a 30-year teaching career at Summerside High School, where she was to have a great influence on the lives of many of her students. She is remembered for her innate ability to exert her power over the class, her enthusiasm for her subjects, especially English and Latin, though on occasion she also taught geometry and German. Her dramatizations, especially of Shakespeare and Dickens, every student in the class had to take a role in the year's Shakespeare play, which was presented on stage in the school auditorium. When a great writer died, Sean O'Casey, Robert Frost, Edith Sitwell are the ones I remember. The lesson of the day was set aside for readings from their work and an assessment of their importance in literature. Her poem, Sing Your Own Songs, indicates her approach to education, to help students to think for themselves and then to create original art from their thoughts. And Heather is going to read that poem. And it was written in 1978 and included as a preface to the program for an art exhibit at EPTEC titled Sunflowers, Trees, and Waves. So Heather is going to read Sing Your Own Songs.
Sing your own songs. Sing your own songs, paint your own pictures, write poems, build houses, and think your own thoughts. And don't, for heaven's sake, let the professionals or critics tell you that you can't, that you are trespassing on their territory, on forbidden ground, the holy ground of art for the artist, the professional. And don't let them tell you that you need a course or a degree before you can paint or write, or bake bread, or plant a garden, or do anything. Depend more on yourself and less on others to tell you what you can do. Recover the lost self-reliance of the artist, craftsman, builder, and thinker. Dare to create something of your own and be proud of that. You did it yourself. And it will have something of you in it, and not be just like all the other synthetic things, advertised for consumers of this and that. Don't be intimidated by talk about conceptual art, minimal art, romantic realism, cubism, etc., or by literary talk of influences, sources, meters, and figures of speech. To create a painting for a song or a poem is better than just to know all about the history of art or poetry. Approach art directly rather than through an ambush of historical or biographical material. And let your imagination take you beyond photographic reality. And don't be afraid to say you like it or you don't like it. Don't wait for the critics to tell you what you should like. Art is an adventure for you alone to experience firsthand.
So you can see that Elaine Harrison was one to give orders. do your own thing, sing your own songs. It was on Prince Edward Island that she met in the late 1940s Eleanor Wheeler, who became her lifelong companion. Eleanor, 15 years her senior, had come to the island from Ontario in 1945 to work as a public health nurse. At about the time they met, Eleanor had rescued a 130-year-old pioneer frame house facing imminent destruction in Fernwood, 15 miles east of Summerside, and in 1948 she had it hauled by horse and capstan 5 miles down the road to the sandstone cliffs a mile to the north of Sea Cow Head. There, in the house that she and Eleanor named Windswept, they spent their summers, arriving as soon as the roads were clear of snow in April and staying until the first cold weather in October or November. And in fact, in the first few years, I think Eleanor tried to live in the house all winter. Elaine will tell you about that later. She will. In that old house, they lived a happy life, and for over 50 years were involved in the intellectual life of the island and beyond, playing host to numerous summer visitors, many of them past students, and corresponding with some of Canada's top writers. When Eleanor, in her middle age, began to lose her eyesight, Elaine became her eyes, reading to her and taking on most of the household chores. In the years when she was teaching, Elaine had smoked cigarettes. But after a health alert in the 1960s, she gave them up, though she said she always missed them. You might say that's a trivial fact. Why should you bring that up? She told the story of how, this is the story about it, just before she gave them up, she fell on the cliffs at Windswept, breaking her leg. She managed to crawl up the bank, and when Eleanor found her, and Eleanor was a public health nurse, remember, the first thing Elaine asked for, even before the doctor was called, and much to Eleanor's disgust, was a cigarette. She and Eleanor were not materially minded. By choice, they led a simple lifestyle, living initially on their salaries and later on their pensions. Then in later years, and I'll just move ahead then and show you some images. These are from the photograph album of Elaine and Eleanor. That's Elaine on the ice at Windswept, these trappings of capitalism. And so they let them sit uncatched and unnoticed. By the time of Eleanor's death in 1996, they had increased considerably in value, but though they were passed on to Elaine, she did not think of the money as hers, and so instead used a great part of it to establish a music scholarship at the University of Prince Edward Island in memory of Eleanor and Eleanor's sister. In 1968, retirement gave Elaine the freedom to turn to what had previously been part-time interests, her poetry, campaigning for favorite causes, but above all, her painting. Inspired by the Group of Seven, a group of Canadian landscape painters, most of you will know who they are, of the early 20th century, but with many other influences from the field of modern art, she found her subject matter in the cliffs and waves at Windswept, the sunflowers in her garden, the trees in the local hardwoods, and in her later years, her cats and her own kitchen. And we'll be looking at examples soon. She was always experimenting with different art techniques, such as block prints, lino prints, monoprints, and with different subject matter. In the early days, she frequently gave her paintings away, away to anyone who appreciated them. But from the 1970s, she began to get the recognition and financial returns they merited. And this is at a particular art exhibit in 1984 at, where was it, George?
Holland College.
Holland College, yeah. Even so, she always felt a sense of wonderment that people would actually pay for what gave her such great enjoyment, especially the higher amounts her paintings began to achieve in the last decade of her life. I have to confess that though I was at Windswept or at her Bedeque home many times, I never actually saw her painting a picture. I would arrive, and there propped on the oil heater or on an easel would be a new creation that had been run up either that morning or a day or two before. Has anyone ever seen her actually painting? No one is admitting it. I don't think she liked observers when she was painting. At Windswept, she worked in the space she had created in the south side of the back porch. It was built on the side of the house, and I think often outside, just outside, if the weather was good. For the winter months at Bedeque, they had a winter home in Bedeque Village, which was the house I lived next to when I was visiting. The house she was in when I was visiting her that winter. For the winter months at Bedeque, she had the upper floor of the small barn behind her house converted into a cozy studio with heating from a small cast iron coal stove. She enjoyed telling stories about her paintings. She was once asked by a casual visitor, how long does it take you to paint a picture? Well, having decided that he was the sort of person who was mentally computing what she was making per hour from her work, at the same time knowing herself that she could often dash one off in less than an hour, or sometimes not, there were many rejects and repaints, she evaded a true answer by replying, a lifetime. Another story she told was of a visitor from off the island who had bought one of her paintings of the island's red sandstone cliffs at Details in Charlottetown, at the Charlottetown Gallery where Arlene Rice was selling her paintings. And the buyer of the picture asked if he could meet the artist. This having been arranged, the visitor arrived at Windswept, and after a time, he asked to be shown the spot where she had set up her easel so that he could take a photograph of the same view. Reluctant to take him to any particular spot, she said, the whole island is my inspiration. This story of hers does not mean that the shore views she created in her painting were fictive or imaginary. In fact, most of them were based on real views of the cliffs at Windswept, two in particular. And I'm just going to show some other events. 1985, where was this one, George? Bedeque, exhibition at Bedeque, when she had an exhibit at that time. And this is Elaine in later years, 1993, aged 78, and Eleanor behind her, then aged 93. And then a little bit later, 1996, Eleanor died in 1996 later on. This is about 1996. And she was recognized, she was proposed for an honorary degree, and it was accepted by the University of Prince Edward Island, who awarded her an honorary degree in 1997. And here she is with the President, Betsy Epperly, and the other recipients of honorary degrees that year. And this is one of the programs, it's simply recent paintings, Elaine Harrison. This was at the Great George Street Gallery. There is a funny saying, I wasn't planning to tell this, but I may as well, sparked by that. Two galleries began to compete for Elaine in the 1990s, the Great George Street Gallery and Details. And there was an incident on Great George Street where, as Elaine got out of her car with a painting, one of the gallery, and I've forgotten her name, but a Great George Street Gallery woman, dashed over, and there was a tug of war, almost, for the painting between the two gallery owners, and Elaine, I think, was probably pleased that she was in such demand. I don't think it was a literal fist fight, but, there was a bit of embarrassment. Now, get my spot again. Yes, the views of her, this is the view from her window taken by George Arsenault. And you can see the cliffs out there, and we'll go outside. This is the view that she often, variations of that view will be in her paintings. And again, that's the view to the south. Have I got it right? No, that's the view to the north. Yeah, I've got the wrong way around. That's looking north. This is the view to the south towards the bridge or towards Seacal Head. And this is all on the property at the back there. And so she would use these views and variations on it. And as she would sketch, she wouldn't take her easel out and do the painting on the rocks. She would sketch and then incorporate it later. However, although there were many, I doubt that there were two paintings by Elaine that are identical at all. She, however, was the first to admit that there were also what she called her pot boilers. These were the popular paintings. Among these, in the last decade of her life, were her whimsical paintings of the cats in her kitchen. They could always sell. Always very saleable, she could dash one off in response to a request from the gallery. But still, every painting was unique, as you shall see later. One of her favorite subjects were blue irises, either the wild island irises or other garden varieties of similar type, and she usually depicted them in a vase. In order to have them at hand to serve as subject material, she planted some in the ditch in front of her house at Bedeque. However, the flowering season for irises is short, a couple of weeks at most. And so inevitably, each July, she would bemoan the fact that they had withered unseen before she had been able to paint them. Since her flower paintings were never botanically exact, I suggested that she use a picture of irises, but she proclaimed that this was not the way she painted. I think she thought that using a photograph as a starting point for painting would somehow be cheating, and so an iris painting would have to wait for another year. Here's another of her iris paintings. I know that in earlier years, she and Eleanor had gone on sketching expeditions, because they often told me the story, more than once, or at least I was present when it was told to other people, of how they were once up west painting near a wharf. I think it was at Tignish, when a local fisherman took an interest in what they were doing. He told them that that was Joe Goody's boat they were painting, and so they would have to put Joe in the painting too. So Elaine put Joe in as well. After Eleanor died in December 1996, at the age of 96, Elaine could get out of the house more often, and thus in the summer of 1997, she suggested that we go on a sketching expedition. We ended up along the harbour at North Rustico, where she pencil sketched the boats and buildings along the wharf for use in later paintings. But I'm going to come back to Elaine Harrison, the painter, later and show a sample. I'm going to turn to Elaine Harrison, the poet. She was also a writer, especially of poetry. The best known of her poems, I Am an Island, and there's Joe Goody's boat, by the way, I think, or it could be. The best of her poems is I Am an Island That Dreams. It was written as a protest against the changes brought about by the Island Development Plan of the 1970s. It also contains a lyrical and sympathetic interpretation of the history of the island's peoples, especially the Mi'kmaq and the Acadians. And our summer student, James Coughlin, is going to read an excerpt from it. It's much longer than what will be read. So, James, do you want to come up?
From I am an island that dreams. I am an island that dreams and talks in its sleep. And is there any harm in that, I ask, such stuff as dreams are made on? I am the stuff of dreams, and my dreams weave in and out, warp and woof, out of the days, long past they come, sweet and light-footed, wide-eyed and shy. And in all seasons, the Mi'kmaq walked through my woods, when the young ferns were unfolding, oh so light green in the first warm days of April. And on hot summer days, they gathered wild berries and rested from their travels in the cool shade of my pines and birches. And when the beech trees stood bronze and golden, and the red maples blazed under low October suns, I watched my people steadying themselves for the long, cold winter ahead. And when grinding ice closed us in on all sides and stark winds went crying through the sky, then we cowered together, the Mi'kmaq and I, they in warm fur and I under piles of snow. And we waited for the storms to pass over and the sky in the west to clear again. And the storms always passed, some fiercer than others, and winters too, even long, bitter ones. And when the last drift ice had melted and sunk in the distance, and the dark blue waters lay open to the sky and stretched from shore to shore in the spring sunshine, then we all looked long at the sun glinting on the open water, and we were glad again and danced and sang. And the sun shone down warm and strong, and the wild geese were flying north to their nesting place in the Arctic, and the land was steaming in the spring sunshine. My dreams call out to me, Abiquit, cradled on the waters. I am an island, and I see things through the warp and woof of time. And today, I see my people leaving their farms and fishing villages, selling out to larger farms and corporations, the Lending Authority and the Land Development Corporation, forced out by high costs of machinery, taxes, inflation. The developers, planners, and technocrats all telling the farmer to go into debt to get more and more. I see my fishermen struggling with low prices for their fish, wharves falling to pieces, and fishermen bust long miles to the other end of my island to work in fish factories. I see my children leaving their small country schools to travel for long hours on buses to a big brick school with few windows to look out. Rose Valley, Fernwood, Little Sands, Park Corner, Travelers Rest. The country schools are up for sale. But I am an island, and I am the small farm and the fishing village and the country road along which my children can walk to a country school. And I am the woods and fields and sandy beaches for my people to roam over. But today, I am being taken over by multinational corporations and large restaurant and hotel chains to cater to thousands of tourists. I am being studied and surveyed and developed by all the powers and sold to outsiders for much money. And I, an island that dreams and talks in its sleep, I will soon be only a place for tourist dollars and nightmares. Buy a mini farm, cut me up and subdivide me for trailers and prefabs, stick kangaroos and African huts, motels and wax museums all over my fields and my shores, and sell me, the fairest land of all, low and beautiful, Abiquit, cradled on the waters.
Wow. Thank you, James, for that. That's quite a poem about that's applicable today as well as in the 1970s when it was written. I recall the time in 1975 when Elaine was asked to read this work at a poetry festival at Georgetown. The well-known island poet Milton Acorn was also going to be there, and he was staying in nearby Cape Traverse. So Elaine, having admired his poetry, phoned him and said that he could come along with her and Eleanor and me in the back seat of the Volkswagen she was driving at the time. That was Milton and I in the back seat. Milton in the flesh, however, did not live up to the image of Milton of the poems. His first mistake, if I can call it that, was to ask her to drive him to the liquor store in Borden for a case of beer. And then he began to drink as we rode along, spilling some of it. He also proved not easy to engage in conversation. He was naturally shy, but also I think he was probably overwhelmed by these two older women and also worried about his having to perform at this festival in Georgetown. He also did not shine at the poetry reading. But Elaine was in her element. She was back in her teaching days with a captive and attentive audience. After I Am an Island, she read another anti-development plan poem that allowed her to take on a greater acting role. Get With It, Boys is the name of the poem, and she stole the show. Then there was Elaine Harrison, the publisher. Publishing was for Elaine a way of acting on her belief that everyone can and should make art or literature. She not only published her own poem, I'm an Island That Dreams, she also transformed Reverend George Russell Harrison, her father's sermons or notebooks, into a limited edition of found poetry she entitled Now in Springtime. More significantly, she encouraged local writers and storytellers such as Emily Laviolette, Antoinette Gallant, and Olive O'Brien, all of Acadian descent, to write down their tales. Emily Laviolette was in fact Elaine's house cleaner at the time when Elaine discovered Emily's creativity and encouraged her to publish her stories for children. Using their own resources without public funding, Elaine Harrison and Associates, namely herself and Eleanor, published and distributed these stories that would otherwise never have reached an audience outside the storyteller's immediate circles. Elaine and Eleanor, great Francophiles, elected to publish storytellers and stories, especially from the Acadian tradition, which were largely overlooked in island publishing in both English and in French at the time. Then there was Elaine Harrison, the lone campaigner. In her writings and letters to the newspapers and her calls to cross-Canada check-up, she spoke out on environmental issues such as pesticide use, the increasing American influence in Canada, the big multinationals, and the bridge. She also enjoyed telling of how in the early 1970s, as one of the sons and daughters of Cornelius Howitt, don't know if any of you remember that, she had taken on the character of Mrs. Russie Haddock, an illiterate and rustic critic of the 1973 centennial celebrations. Elaine was undoubtedly on the left on most issues, and it has to be said that on many subjects she was unwilling to consider a point of view different from her own. And once a view had been adopted, she held to it throughout her lifetime, come hell or high water. One example was her long-standing support for the communist regimes of the Soviet Union and China. For many years, she subscribed to what were clearly glossy propaganda magazines extolling the success stories of both countries. I suspect this support went back to her student days in the 1930s, and clearly it was based on the right sort of thinking, namely support for the underdog and downtrodden. But over the years, this support did not waver despite the very evident shortcomings of the regimes in both countries. Thus it was that she ended up having to defend the brutal suppression of the student protesters in Tiananmen Square in 1989. Given such intransigent views, the best way for many of her friends to remain friends with her was to avoid certain topics altogether. That, in part, is the reason that I know little of the history of her political views, of how they originated, and why she came to hold them. In terms of Canadian politics, in her later life, her views mellowed into support for either the NDP, always her first choice, or the Liberal Party, especially when led by Pierre Trudeau, whose pro-Canadian policy she strongly supported. Thus, it should come as no surprise that she was strongly against the Mulroney government's establishment of free trade with the USA. She's only alive today. She might be saying, "I told you so." Then we have Elaine, the lover of animals. Her cats and dogs especially, but also the raccoons, skunks and foxes that she fed at windswept. One of my most vivid picture memories of her is on a snowy day in Bedeque in April 1992. A neighbor's cat, which had given birth in a vacant barn across the road, had decided it was time to bring her kittens to Elaine, but she kept dropping them on the road. I can still see Elaine in her red woolen beret, bright blue jacket, yellow mitts and leg warmers, all good primary colors, dashing out to save the kittens, one by one, from being run over by the morning traffic. Then, at times in the summer, I would get a call from Elaine when she was at Fernwood in extreme distress. The reason would be that one of her cats had killed a squirrel or a rabbit, and she wanted me to come out to bury it. It was very evident that she had a phobia about dead animals. As punishment, and to prevent further killings, the offending cat would be confined to the house for a time. But after a day or so, Elaine would take pity on it, and so its sentence would be remitted, and it would be let out to kill again. Now, I'm going to bring Elaine into the conversation directly, and I'm going to do this by, let me see if I change that. Yeah. This is an interview with Elaine, recorded in, it was recorded in March 2000 by the CBC by Karen Mayer. And I think this will, for those of you who don't know Elaine, this will certainly give you a good idea of her character. This is the year 2000. She would have been 85 at the time, and she would live for another 3 years.
Going right back to that, are you? I was born in Nova Scotia, Petite Riviere. They pronounced it was Riviere. You're going to be, the French pronunciation. Down on the South Shore, where my father had moved as a young clergyman in 1913. I think they were married. I was born in 1915. Oh, I shouldn't be telling that on the air. My God, they'll have my age and everything. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm proud to have lasted this long. Some people don't.
When did you move to the island?
1937. I came with my father. I just graduated that year. And I thought I had the world by the tail. But nobody wanted me for any job or anything. I think the first job I had was working down in Smallman's for a whole week in that store for $7 a week, all day long. Right, practically. And I thought it was great because I hadn't earned anything in my life. It was the Depression.
Right. And what have you studied in school and university?
In university, I went through on scholarships. My father didn't have the money to send me, so I had to get through somehow. I did Latin and English and got an arts degree, and I did 7 extra examinations to get the degree with distinction. I blow about that. That's awful, but it's something to blow about.
So eventually,
I took no education courses.
right, but eventually you did become a teacher here on the
I
island.
did, but I just took a month of something they had in Charlottetown. I learned on the spot, learned on the job.
So where did you start teaching on the island?
Summerside, and the first job I had, did I tell you I'm now repeating grade 1, substituting. That was after about being here 2 years maybe. I just made $1.25 a day, but it seemed good to me. As I say, I never earned a cent.
Did you enjoy teaching?
I enjoyed the teaching, working with young people. I particularly enjoyed teaching poetry and drama. I think I should have gone on the stage, really. I took all the best parts in the plays. Romeo and Juliet, Julius Caesar, you name it, and gave them the bits. They had fun with it, and then they would put the plays on. So the other day when I saw somebody down at the Confederation Center, she said, I'm Trevor Sharp. Do you remember me? I said, oh, you were Falstaff. You know, that's how when I see them, I remember them as the characters they were. Macbeth or Lady Macbeth, for example, Curtis Barlow, he was Macbeth one time.
You have a remarkable memory.
I can remember when I want to. The hard things, you know, life isn't all up. You have your downs too. But I don't let them get to me. As they say, that you know that expression, that Irish expression, what you lose on the merry-go-rounds, you make up on the swings. That's a good one, isn't it? Or, well, you've got to count on making them up on the swings.
So how long did you teach, Elaine?
I taught for almost 30 years, until I was 52. And then I decided that was enough. I wanted to get outdoors. It was so hard correcting papers in the beautiful month of June. Or going in from the country. I'd go in when the sun was rising and come back when it was setting practically. I thought, I'm missing the best of the life. And I'm just going to enjoy it. And besides, I had some operations and things, and my eyes were getting cataracts. So I had reasons, and I went out.
Now, when along the way did you begin to paint, or how did that happen?
I was painting
All along?
all along, but more after I stopped. I had more time, and I thought, well, I'll just try to find out all there is to know about this. I haven't found out yet, but it's fun experimenting. And I don't consider myself, well, anyway.
What inspires you in your artwork? Your canvases are so colorful and so vivid, so full of life. Where
I use good paints, artist quality. I pay a lot for them. And so when anybody gets a painting of mine, they're getting something, the colors will last. And I have to, well, they help me, the colors. And good texture. I like texture, the feel of it. So when I paint with painting knives, and you give a stroke, boy, and that'll be its body, the body and the arms and the legs, and get them moving, and there you've got somebody. Easy.
Now, when did you move to Bedeque? How did this happen?
61. Well, we had the place in the country, but it was way out, and the plows weren't working in those days. Eleanor would stay out there in the part of the winter, then go up to Toronto for some of the time, 6 weeks or so, and I'd go into Summerside and be with my parents. So we decided, after my father died in 59, we better get another place where you wouldn't be away out on the shore with no plows or anything, you see. I used to, when Eleanor was there sometime in the winter, I might as well boast about this. Here's another big boast coming off. I would take in supplies on the weekend to her, and how would I go? Well, they didn't plow the roads in those days, but they had the ice bushed. And I would go across the ice on skates, take off my skates, go through the lower Bedeque, land there, and then up the other side on the cove, and up through the fields and so on. Or ski. or snowshoe. And it would take me about an hour and a half maybe to get from Fernwood to Summerside. So I miss all that. I miss the skating on the harbor, and I don't like indoor skating so much. And Eleanor was a great skier too, and we skied across. And
You mentioned Eleanor. She was your great lifelong friend.
yes, and she was a great inspiration and a wonderful storyteller. And her love of music and everything. There's a scholarship at the university established in her name in music. And
She painted as well. You've got her paintings hanging up.
that's it. And she had such a wonderful sense of humor and their stories. I'm not a storyteller at all. I was the lucky one there. It's a great loss. She was 96 when she died.
She passed away.
That was December the 27th in 96. And just a month before, I'd had a big operation. So there were two big blows right there, huge blows. But you have to take them. Well, this is life from what you've read. And as somebody, W.H. Auden, said about literature, when you're a reader, it helps you, great literature, helps you to enjoy life all the more and to endure it.
You have such a passion for almost everything you tackle. Tell me a bit about your the social activism side of you, or your passion for issues. Where does that stem from?
I don't know when it started, but certainly if there's an issue around, I'm bound to take the more popular side, the minority side. And it doesn't make me popular, but my reading and everything, I feel that the big business has got control of education. And I fear for that, and the computers and everything. They're never going to take the place of live teaching and children and so on. The individual is being pushed aside, and big corporations and multinationals have the control, and they even are dictating to Parliament. So there's the difficulty. I mean, our democracy is in danger, and we have such a marvelous country, but look at the CBC itself in great danger. Well, this cost cutting, it's not right because it's making more misery in the world with all the unemployment. There are people who want to work, and the West is getting so rich at the expense of the third world with the debt and everything, forcing those people down there to be one crop country, the tobacco and so on, just as the island with its potatoes. My God, we're ruining our soil, we're ruining everything, and now they're wondering if they're going to have any proper seed.
I guess many of us have concerns about these sorts of things that you raise, but only certain people go beyond being concerned to doing something or educating themselves further or speaking out, and I'm curious about that side of you and what compels you to take that extra step.
Well, most people think they're powerless, but if they'd read John Ralston Saul's book, The Unconscious Civilization, they realize that we have some power. We must speak out, I think. I don't speak out enough.
You have so much energy. Tell me about how you spend your day, or what you occupy yourself with. Do you paint every day?
No, I'm not a regular painter. I just paint when I have a spurt of. I haven't enough time for everything, you see.
How many critters do you have in your care?
Well, I love the animals. I have 6 cats. Don't think I had them all because there was a lot of them strays, and people didn't want them. Cats and a dog, and I plant trees. I have a little garden. I walk. I just do whatever the spirit moves me. If it doesn't move me, okay.
Elaine, it's been choice chatting with you, and I really appreciate you welcoming me into your home.
Well, I put on a spurt there. That's it.
Well, I think you've got a good idea. If you had never met Elaine, you've got a good idea of her style and such. Now, I've got the picture here, but it's not staying on my screen. Hello, dear. Can you come to the rescue? It's not, okay, thank you, Helen. I'm now going to look at some paintings fairly quickly. Some paintings of Elaine Harrison. And Elaine made statements about her art at various stages, and these were recorded by Kevin Rice in the book about Elaine. And in 1984, she said, "I prefer to paint quickly, right on the spot. I like knives better than brushes, and I like to experiment in various media." And then at another time, she added, "I like painting with knives because I dislike painting with brushes. I like to be surprised by a painting because I never know what will happen along the way. And the first impression, the first quick impression is what I like. I do no polishing up." In 1987, in 1987, she said her paintings praise the wonder and mystery of sea and sky. Kevin Rice, who's an art historian and critic in an assessment of her work, said her painting style evolved over the decades and she frequently experimented with her methods. Mostly her work was vigorous, direct, and colorful abstracted impressions of her subjects, red cliffs and sea shorelines, stands of hardwood trees, harbors and boats, portraits, interiors, and still lives. Her colors are most often bright and are most often lively and bright, but there are exceptions. And he analyzed, "I feel she came to her favorite imagery through her own deep affinity for this island, its history, and in particular, its nature and her own experience of it, not only through painting, writing, and her concerns for our environment, but also through her love of gardening, camping, canoeing, snowshoeing, and swimming." And he noted that a hooked map with its grid images depicting many outdoor pursuits Harrison enjoyed illustrates this point quite literally. And this is that mat, which was hooked by Elaine and Eleanor at some stage, probably in the early years of Windswept. And you can see all the activities, the house itself, canoeing, snowshoeing, playing music, tenting, skating or jumping ice floes, I guess, gardening, the pump, the horse, and the artists at the very end there. In terms of style and subjects, her paintings are recognizably Harrison. This is Kevin Rice writing. Her cats, her sunflowers, her trees form a legacy of creation that Harrison shared proudly. And George Arsenault, who is present tonight, has over the last 25 years or so made a point of collecting all of the images that he can come across of Elaine's paintings, and he's built up quite a number by just having people that have a painting of hers either allowing him to photograph it or else sending him a digital image of it. And so these are some of the images he's collected, and they're a small selection of the several hundred that he's collected. This is a seascape but it's not typical Elaine. It might be an early one in that you don't see the island's red rocks. But this looks more typical, but you can see her use of broad patches of color applied by a knife rather than painting. And I'll just go through these without commenting on them, just to give you an idea of the variety of her paintings. All of these are of sea cliffs. They're all very variable. Some of them are dated at the bottom. Often she did not date her paintings or sign them. There is a PhD in the future for someone to analyze fully her oeuvre, her work. And you can see the free style. But it's all recognizably Elaine Harrison. And they all differ. This one's called Rum Runner's Cove, which is it's taken from the other view, the southern part of the back of her property. And the snow in the winter receding. And this one is the ice. It's called A Southwest Wind Blew Ice Back into the Cove. And some of them are almost abstract. This one called Still Standing. And here's one very different from the others. And there are many others of cliffs and shorelines. Boats and Wars, another favorite subject of hers. And you've seen this one earlier, Joe Goody's Boat Breadth. But there were many others. And you can see this one is dated 1984. This one, 1982, very different in color. Here's another undated as far as I can see on it. Sometimes they have dates on the back as well, where she's written the date. And another called Malpeque Morning, dated 1985. And another. And I think this one is in Eptec. Is this the Eptec one? Or there is one of the coastline. Or rather the Jubilee Theatre in Summerside. And then there were another favorite subject was what you could call the village in winter. And this is one of the, this is dated 1984. And often with children playing. This was a very popular series, so that everyone wanted one of these. And she produced many, but none of them are a copy of the previous one. They're all free and different from each other. This one is 1986. And again, children playing in the snow. A sort of fictional creation. She's not actually depicting real places. But this combines her tree images with the village, and often she did this, combine different topics in one with the children. Here's one totally different in style, but with the same subject matter. And then you get paintings like this, which are abstract, or it's not abstract exactly, but it's it could be she admired Picasso. And then here is one with skating, where the ice is depicted as black and the village is in the background, and everyone is having a good time in winter sports. And then she did this one in Charlottetown for Arlene Rice and the Details Gallery, which was in that building. So Arlene asked her to do one of the building, and this is it done in the year 2000. Another popular subject was woods and trees, and usually areas of paint with the knife. And in 1984, and this doing hardwood trees in winter, and another also 1984. And then orchard trees, I think, trees by my window in Bedeque. It was an apple tree that she had in her yard, and you could see the shadow of the tree on the snow. And this, another 1985, I think, hardwood. And more freer in style, you can see the paint basically there, and you can make out that it is trees. And more trees. These are all in private collections. And here we got a very almost abstraction of the tree shapes. It's no longer recognizable as trees. Although it's called fallen trees. And here just a mass of color. And another showing the woods in autumn. And still all these bright colors. Less so here. And then winter trees with conifer trees, spruces and snowbanks. This was a topic she did, this very free. This is actually, it could be just a practice sketch because it was in her, after she died, it was in her studio. And another, just practicing possibly. But they make very good paintings as well, too, decorative paintings. Sunflowers. I've just taken sunflowers. There were many other flowers and potted plants. I'm only taking a selection. But she was well known for her sunflowers. This is 82, I think, if I'm reading it rightly. And very freely sketched, dabs of paint all over the canvas. And a very bright yellow display with the background incorporating the colors of the flowers. And this, I think, in 75, I think this is very relatively early, although she was painting from the 1950s onward, but still sunflowers. And here you have a monoprint which depicts, she was always experimenting with different techniques to paint on glass and then press the page onto the glass. And this, I just include this because it's the back of a painting. You can see the wire. There obviously is was a reject. But if you could split the board in two, you might get two paintings, and it looks as good as some of the others that we've seen in terms of its depiction of sunflowers. Cats and kitchen. And these are very variable. This is our kitchen in Bedeque, not at Fernwood. They had a stove of that type. And you can see the various cats. I don't know what the chronology of these paintings is because they're very variable. What was the first cat picture? I don't know. And then they get into all sorts of poses. And this is also in the Bedeque house. This is no cat in this, but it's a kitchen, and that's the corner of her kitchen there. And the cats are beginning to dominate with their green eyes, sinister. And there's one in the living room. And then cats with flowers and fruit, so it's still life with cats, I guess you could call it. And Eleanor with, I assume Eleanor with a cat. And cats with flowers again. And then this is a very almost abstract. This is what, George?
That's her very last painting, a few months before she died.
Oh, yes. She was still painting in the spring, April or so, and she died in June. And look at this cat with the a very different style of painting. And cat with flowers again. Well, many cats, 4. Cat must have been a theme. Well, I just put them next to each other because they're the same subject. And another woman with a cat in a kitchen. Cat on the table. That was common at Elaine. And a cat, a portrait of a cat on its own. And then a far more realistic cat, well, not realistic, but different style of art. And then look at this sinister cat. And then you have the Madonna of the cats. In a very, what was that? The imagination of the woman to incorporate all those cats and the art behind it. It's all sorts of 20th century art was coming into it. And I'm not. Finally, one of the dog. I thought we should include Laddie. And he's in a sort of abstract background of sorts, a real looking map, but odd looking areas behind him. Still lifes. And I don't know the immediate years of these. This could almost pass for post-impressionist paint style. And a bowl of green apples. Another bowl of green apples, but very different from the previous one. Very expressive backgrounds. And here we have a bowl of fruit with a chair and various, and then harvest gourds and fruit. And many of these styles I'm totally unfamiliar with, I haven't seen myself other than through George collecting pictures of them. And here, look at this could be onions or pumpkins or something, but it's the style of the art. And the kitchen utensils, iris, with the backgrounds incorporating all sorts of colors. And then these geometric backgrounds with flowers and vases. And here, sort of flowing backgrounds with apples on the table. And becoming more abstract or self-portraits. This is a serious attempt at a self-portrait dating from 1955. So it's an early self-portrait. Here's one from 1983. It's very, just the way she captures the clothing is really has a reality about it. And then a looser coat. My microphone has gone off. Is it on? Yeah. A very different style. They may not be exact portraits, but they express her gloominess, I guess. But just with how she can create with a few strokes. And this is called The Old Actress, but I think it's a self-portrait. And then people of all sorts. I think this is her mother, an early attempt to portray her mother. And you've seen her siblings, and probably copied from a photograph of the time. And this little boy is one that she did fairly early. I don't know if it has a date.
It doesn't, but it's one that she liked a lot, and it's the only painting that traveled from Windswept to the Bedeque house. So, very
So she kept this one on the move. Had it on view, where she was. Oh, my battery is giving one of those battery signals. That's what's happening. So we're soon finished. Another portrait, very realistic looking people, even though they're sketchily done.
Nathan Campbell.
Do you know that?
Nathan Campbell.
Is that the name?
Yeah.
Is it one in your? Do you have that painting or?
No, remember she, yeah.
Yeah, she did 2 or 3 of that little boy.
Oh, yeah. Because the mother showed us the sweater.
Oh, yes. Yeah, let's go back. Oops. Yeah, I guess I can't go back. And these are just a few sketches, and she's done a face. And another sketch, and a fiddler. This one you know, George, don't you? Or it's not one of.
Well, it's mine. She only did 2 or 3 with the fiddler, and I liked it, and so.
Yeah, you have one of them. Yeah. And another.
Isn't that you?
It isn't me. I own it. It's one of mine. This one I don't know. A lot of her work is experimental, and she rejected a lot, repeated things. This is one where there is a face, but I only include that one because if you turn it on its side, you see it started as a woodland. She's trying to. Yeah, these weren't. Some of these were in her house when she died. They weren't. And this one, is in my house. But it began. I'm sure it began life as a landscape because on the right side you can see the sea. And the left side, you see the horizon line there. It didn't work out, so she did a. And this is again one that was an experiment. And then you get the more finished versions. Mother and child. I'm just going to shout here, I think. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
And then her caricatures of from the newspaper, 50th wedding anniversaries. And they're meant to be comical. This is a bit out of focus, but it's another 50th wedding anniversary. People in groups. This is quite, she's got the faces of children there quite well.
It's the school children in Fernwood.
Is it?
Around Old Farland.
I see. Then you've got the caricature of the Women's Institute. I hope no one here lost. She was just enjoying painting. Another women's group. And this women's group is actually, she painted for a women's group. Which is it? It hangs in some women's center. And then some more rural winter dressing. And this one, of course, is in the
Jubilee Theatre, all the world is a stage, and all the men and women merely players. And this one, La Chandeleur, is showing two people dancing and everyone around. What's the origin of that?
Well, she was inspired by an illustration in my book called Courir la Chandeleur.
Oh. And I just will finish with her abstract art, because she certainly also did abstract. Perhaps it was less popular. I'm not sure how these are created, perhaps pressing something onto the surface, perhaps block. Does anyone know who's an artist here? And you can see how free and the intertwining shapes. This one I had in Belfast, Northern Ireland. There's one, she said, "Do you want that?" And I said, "Oh, I'll take it." And it looks quite good, frame. I call it the Trojan War. And another of those types. And this also, she said, "Do you want that?" And I said, "Yes, I'll take that. I'll take anything you give me, Elaine." And well, I thought, yes, lobsters or organic shapes, all in a world. And then an entirely different form of abstract art. And another entirely different form. Well, I'm going to finish off that is a look at her paintings. As she entered her 80s, her annual question to me on my return from Northern Ireland at the start of each summer was, "How do I look?" It was a question that required extreme care. If there was any slight hesitation or equivocation in my answer, I was in for a critical cross-examination. A simple "you're looking good" or "well" was never enough. What was required was "never better" or "as young as ever." "I'm going to live to be 100, she would say, and then cite as a precedent the builder of Windswept, Alexander Anderson, the Loyalist, who had settled at Seacowhead in 1797 and had died in her house at the age of 106 in 1852. The life of this remarkably varied and talented woman came to an end on June 16, 2003, just 3 days shy of her 88th birthday, and 2 days after we had celebrated that birthday in advance with her. As a non-believer, Elaine considered that this was the only life she would have, and so she clung to it with all the strength of her being, fighting right up to the end the cancer that killed her. Even in April, just 2 months before she died, she was energetically painting with her one good arm, and we've seen that painting tonight. Thanks to the home care provided by Karen McLenithan and Vian Emery, she was able to pass away peacefully in the bedroom next to her kitchen in Bedeque, while close friends kept a vigil nearby. She wanted no religious ceremony, no memorial service. Her wish was that her ashes be quietly scattered at Windswept, where Eleanor's had been 7 years before. However, her many friends could not let it go at that. On a windy, overcast August day, we gathered outside the house at Windswept. As we began, the threatening clouds dispersed and the sun shone. We read 3 of her poems. One of them expresses more about her than I can ever say with my inferior words. Asked in 1980 for a summary of her life for a book on island poets, she shunned the standard biography and sent in the following piece as straight prose, but which I've taken the liberty to arrange as the verse it clearly is. And it's called A Summary of My Life. I dislike summaries, straight lines, neat designs, labels and systems. All is movement and change with sunlight and shadow. Like the coming and going of the seasons or the waves along the shore. But there are the constant things, like great music, poetry, art, and the little acts of kindness and of love to stay with us and steady us through life. Like small pebbles found embedded in island cliffs and left there by the glaciers and rivers long ago silent. I look for such pebbles. When I was a child, I used to call them lucky stones, and sometimes I find a few. So in the midst of this mighty whirling of sun and stars and wind and sea, as this small planet Earth moves with millions of galaxies through space and time, I go too, holding a few pebbles in my hand. On that day at Windswept, we found a basket of such pebbles that over the years she had picked up from the shore. We each took one in her memory, either to keep or to return to the shore to continue its journey with Elaine in the mighty whirling. We also broke bread in her memory to cast to the gulls and crows that she had fed off the cliffs for so many years, and as you can see her doing in that picture. So thank you for coming. Any questions or comments? That is my presentation. We have refreshments at the back, and you don't have to stay. Some of you obviously need to get to other places, but if you have any questions, I have a few announcements to make as well about various events in the museum, but perhaps we'll deal with questions first.
Did Elaine have any training at all as a painter? Did she take any lessons that you know, or was she purely self-taught?
Well, that's a good question. I think she belonged to an art club. In the 1940s and 50s, there were artists, some amateur artists who got together, and I don't actually know whether does anyone know whether she had training, but I think a large part of it was just through observation, reading about all of the modern artists, and the group of seven, especially Tom Thompson, was a particular inspiration in her art, and the Impressionists, Van Gogh, I always never know how to say that. It's Van Gogh over here and Van Gogh in the UK. So, all the, the post-Impressionists, and you can see that in their style. But it's the variety of the styles that she used, and also the subject matter. The subject matter was a few particular